as a gift for the knitter or as a project to be hastily completed by Christmas. There was an array of snuggly sweaters for those without the time or inclination to actually knit something. My favorite part of the display was the 4-hand knitted Christmas stockings hanging in front of a painted fireplace, complete with licking orange flames. The artwork was courtesy of Theodore, one of the vampire knitters, who, apart from being a former policeman, had painted sets for amateur theater productions. And curled up in front of the fire, almost as though she could feel the warmth, was my black cat and familiar Nix. I'd put twinkly lights all around the window and the painted fireplace, so my shop looked festive and inviting. When I walked in, the place was bustling. Mary was trapped in the corner with a young, intense man. As the door closed behind me, she sent me a glance of appeal, and I went straight over, ignoring 3 other customers, who all seemed to be browsing. Before I could ask how I could help, the guy turned to me. "I'm looking for a knitted iPad cover, and she says she doesn't know what I'm talking about." "An iPad cover? How complicated is that?" Of course, I'd talked to Mary about computers in general, but we hadn't had time to go through every permutation from the smartphone to the tablet. I smiled soothingly. "I'm afraid we don't have any knitted iPad covers, or any patterns to make them. It's a good idea, though." Now he looked even more annoyed. Why couldn't she just tell me that? "She's from Egypt," I said, as though that explained everything. He shook his head. "I think they have iPads in Egypt. Not in the Middle Kingdom." After that very dissatisfied customer had stalked out, I turned to Mary, who looked flustered and anxious. "Don't worry, you're catching on really fast." She nodded gratefully and headed to the cash desk where a customer had a sweater kit and a knitting pattern book she wanted to buy. It would be a nice, smooth, easy purchase, exactly what Mary needed to get her confidence back. She might not be a knitting genius or conversant with every kind of computer on the planet, but Mary was surprisingly good with customers. She'd been a servant to a lesser wife of one of the pharaohs, so she was used to serving, and she did it well. When she'd finished with the customer, she came to me with the notebook she always carried. In it, she'd write questions for me or reminders of things she'd learned. She had a good memory and listened intently, so I knew she'd catch on eventually. She just had a lot of catching up to do. It wasn't always easy, as Mary lived in my guest room upstairs and we worked together. However, she was a much more experienced witch than I was, so while I could help her to navigate the modern world, she was trying to help me settle into being a witch. We were busy for the rest of the day, and afterwards we went upstairs to the flat above the shop. For our dinner, I'd bought kebabs and was making a spiced rice dish I'd found online. I tried to cook things that would be familiar to Mary, or at least not make her turn away in horror as she had the first time she saw black pudding. After dinner, she read the local newspaper as she liked to know what was going on, and she could ask me about anything that was confusing, which was quite a bit. Since the Vampire Knitting Club was meeting that night, I decided to stay in and practice my own knitting. Even though my former assistant, Eileen, had turned out to be a soul-sucking demon, she had helped me improve my knitting. She got me to begin with a simple square. I was on my 3rd square now, and one of these days I was going to complete a square that didn't look as though it had been attacked by moths, or hungry lions, or turned into every geometric shape but square. I don't know how I dropped so many stitches, and why I could never find them. I think even the endless patience of the vampires was beginning to run thin. The buzzer on the house phone went off about 8 o'clock that night, indicating there was someone at the door. It was my grandmother and her best friend and maker, Sylvia. They both came in wearing smart new outfits. Sylvia, who in life had been a stage and screen star in the 1920s, always looked glamorous. But my grandmother always looked like a quintessential grandmother. And she still did. She wore her white hair coiled neatly in a bun. Her lined face was as kind as ever, but I was pretty sure that if I looked inside her coat, I would see a designer's name on the label. "How was your trip?" I asked, holding out my arms. I hugged first my grandmother and then Sylvia. "I didn't expect you back so soon." Gran hadn't had much chance to travel in life. She'd been widowed young and had run Cardinal Wolsey's for more than 50 years. Now that she was undead, she had the time and some very rich friends who also liked to travel. She and Sylvia had been in Paris and Rome.